Renovations or something?
I don't know. There's a piece of paper in the window saying closed until the 17th. Been looking forward to it all day. Okay, right, the leader's back.
Lee, I'm just going to mute your microphone until we get to the item, okay?
Good evening, everyone. I think we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Scrutiny for this additional meeting in our calendars. I thank you for your attendance, members of the panel, substitutes, members of the public, visiting councillors, officers, and everyone involved in this entire slick operation. Right, there are no practice evacuations this evening, but if an alarm does sound, then please make your way downstairs via the main stairs or the side staircase and rendezvous in the Town Hall car park. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet and of course will be recorded and we can all watch it in the future. Mobile phones off please. I had to myself turn off notifications for TikTok earlier. I didn't even know it was on, but it was pinging at me all day. So if that happens, then it'll be a fine for me to the Mayor's charity. We may break at 7:30. I'm Councillor Darius Laws. Tonight I identify as the chairman of the scrutiny panel, and if we can have introductions around the table, please, starting on my left.
Councillor Simon Appleton, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Vanessa Moffat, Mile End Ward.
Lee Scordis, Old Heath, Hythe and Rowhedge.
Councillor Jocelyn Law, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor William Sunnox, Rural North Ward, substituting for Councillor Paul Dundas.
Point of order, could you just clarify who you're substituting for?
Councillor Dennis Willits, sorry, my head's in the air.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward.
Lucy Bredman, Strategic Director and Support to the panel.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the panel.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to attend. David King, Leader of the Council.
Patricia Barry, Interim Director of Estates.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Item 3, urgent items. I am unaware of any. Item 4, declarations of interest, members. I see none. Okay. Item 5, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve here in relation to the scrutiny panel of the 11th of February and of the 27th. I thought they were excellent and accurate reflection of those meetings, and I propose that we accept those. Do I see everyone in agreement and support? I do. Thank you. Very good, Mr. Clark. Okay, item 6 is a general have your say, and I think we have a visiting councillor who wishes to join the hot seat. So, Councillor Smith, if you'd like to join the hot seat and have your say.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to make you all aware of a visit that the leader and I made to Beyond the Box, which is our temporary accommodation hub that we've set up now to help those who are unfortunately in temporary accommodation. I was particularly touched by the people who we met down there and the tragic stories that we heard. We heard a story of a person who was struggling to get custody of their children, having left an abusive relationship because there was no settled accommodation available for the children. If you're in temporary accommodation, you can be moved on. That was one issue. Another situation we heard about was a family that was cooking their meals in a kettle because they were in bed and breakfast accommodation. That was the only facility available, and we were amazed at the menu that could be provided from the use of a kettle. But this is what people are living in. Somewhere else, a situation where their 2 children were attending schools that were literally miles apart, one in the west, one in the north of Colchester, facing the position, how do they get their children to school It's either expensive or time consuming, or do you move a child from a school where they're settled to another school knowing that with temporary accommodation you could be moving again? These are difficult situations and a situation that is growing. We have now 450 families, or households, they're not necessarily all families, in temporary accommodation just in this borough. And we are struggling to maintain that situation. And it's not just this council that's suffering. Councils up and down the country are facing similar problems. The social cost of the damage that this is happening is immense. And it's great to see what we're being able to do to improve the situation. But what those families really need is a permanent home. And I'm touched by a question that the leader asked one of the people. He's very positive, as a leader tends to be. Where do you see yourselves in 6 months' time? Here, because I need a 3-bedroom property and the waiting list is 3 years. I think all we can do as an administration to reduce the situation of homelessness, and by doing that, what we desperately need is affordable housing, particularly for rent, that get these people into a permanent home. Because you and I and everyone else in this panel knows where we're going to be sleeping tonight, tomorrow night, what have you. If you're in temporary accommodation, you do not have that luxury. The council could, at 24 hours notice, decide you're moving somewhere else, and that somewhere else could be outside the borough. Thank you.
Thank you for that first-hand account and insight. And just for the record, as Chairman of Scrutiny, I applaud this authority's pragmatic approach around that beyond-the-box deal, which was why I supported it when it came around as an opportunity. It seems entirely appropriate that we did that, and I do know of people who have had to use kettles off North Station Road to eat food, and I do know of people that have got that nightmare of how do you get 2 children to school in the morning. I have 2 children to get to school in the morning, and it's a nightmare, and I live about 300 metres away, so I just can't imagine what it would be like if you are thrust away from your community and your support network in temporary accommodation through a situation as you described. So thank you for that insight. It's useful context. Okay, I don't think we have any other members of the public tonight with anything to say that has been given in due notice, so we will move on. And we will now look at item number 8, Cabinet or Portfolio Decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 9, we technically have 2 items. One is mine, which is a little surprise treat for you, which is that I do have to declare I'm personally invested in this because I'm on the record, and in a recent discussion I generated some correspondence, shall we say, with regards to my views around amplified devices in the city centre. And I specifically created correspondence because I referenced a Christian preacher on the High Street every Wednesday afternoon, but I subsequently, to be fair, also went to observe the regular Sunday morning amplification that happens around the War Memorial, and I take the same view with that amplification that I do with the Christian preacher, which is that I find it to be antisocial. Now, that's my personal view, but I'm acutely aware that the Public Space Protection Order for the as it was there in the town centre makes specific reference to how the use of skateboarding could be construed as intimidating. Now, it may well be, but I can tell you that I find the application of certain discourse to be intimidating, and the prospect of it in the future be potentially intimidating. And to put a marker down, if you aren't aware of it, but you can get drones that can fly that you can speak through. And this could happen at major public events, and it could be very, very antisocial, deliberately disruptive. We know that some of the climate change protesters were seeking to use drones around key airports and infrastructure to cause disruption. The amplification opportunities are related, and it concerns me. So what I would like to do over the course of the coming months, and Mrs. Bredman, I would welcome your advice, is when we get an opportunity to look at the PSPO, because it comes up for renewal by 2026, can we consider a discussion around amplification? I don't want to be a party pooper. I don't like bagpipes personally, but they're probably acceptable on occasion. It's the perpetual continuous amplification that concerns me. So I would welcome a conversation. Mrs. Bredman, how could we go about looking at this and giving the panel a chance to consider an appropriate discussion?
So, absolutely at your liberty to have a conversation about it. You can call in some third-party experts to help with your review of that. What may be useful to think about is the fact that the PSPO will be reviewed for the city centre next year. That review won't happen next year. It will start very soon because it takes a long time to review it properly. Anything in a PSPO needs very good evidence. It's a hard tool to solve problems with. You can't add things in there lightly. You're talking about, fixed penalty notices for people. So, again, I would say that gathering some evidence around that area will be important. The other thing that's always really important with these is understanding the unintended consequences of that. So, again, when you talk about amplified noise, you'd need to consider, would that include bagpipes? Would that include music in the park? Would it include buskers? So again, I think there's a lot to consider here, but absolutely within your gift to do that. You have the crime and disorder reduction panel, I think, as well, which will also, and actually for you to look at that and feed into the review of the PSPO might be a very welcome thing. So we can definitely schedule that in if you're minded to do it.
Thank you. That's enough for me. I think we will take a look at, see if the panel is minded to do that in the new municipal year, of which there might be a different chairman sat in this panel, this seat. You never know. Okay, right. Second item then. So for clarity here, Mr. Clark, I'm looking in your direction. We have an item requested by Councillor Dundas, affectionately entitled Mill Road. Now, this is not being accepted as a call-in, so just for the record, but it is being accepted under 6(2) of the overview and scrutiny procedure rules, and that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. So we'll be getting on to that later. Is that correct? Terminology?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So we'll be getting on to that later, as indicated by the order paper. We've done it this way round because it'll then allow the panel to have a full conversation and get the nuts and bolts, standard items out of the way. I just wanted to go back to the last one and just clarify. So when it comes to the looking at the PSPO, the intention is that we'll ask the panel after the annual meeting, so at the June meeting, whether it wishes that to go on the work programme and when it would like it scheduled. Just wanted to check for clarity.
I think so. I mean, it might be, colleagues, it might be appropriate to do it formally under crime and disorder, but then actually, that depending on when that lands, it might not be. We might do it as a separate work item. But I think I'm personally invested, having made such a noise around the matter, that I may be wrong, and I may be wrong. But I probably, as chairman, have to follow through with it so that there is a discussion around it.
We do have the next Crime and Disorder Committee meeting, as you know, in February 2026. We do have the possibility, if the panel was minded to discuss this as an earlier juncture, to potentially either schedule an extra Crime and Disorder Committee meeting, or what we could do is use one of the existing scrutiny panel dates and then have a scrutiny panel meeting and then reconvene immediately after that as Crime and Disorder Committee, and then look at that one item. That's something
that sounds quite good. Okay, I think we have a consensus here, but that's a good idea. New municipal year. Okay, thank you. Right, moving forward, item 10, the annual scrutiny report 24 to 25. Colleagues, I think you can be very proud to be part of this. It is a really, really good read, very concise report. The only area, Mr. Clark, I wish you would consider, from my point of view, before I open it up to colleagues, is on page 10, when we talk about Mill Weir, it was a specific request that this panel got sight of the report before it goes to Cabinet for a decision. And that's because we want to help Cabinet because it is a very, very complex decision, if we're going to use that word, on what to do at that site. So I think if that could be noted in there as an amendment, then that would be helpful. But beyond that, I'm very happy and will commend it wholeheartedly to full council. Colleagues, do I see any other issues on this item? Would you wish to add anything, challenge anything, or are you all happy? Gosh, this is going really well. Right, okay. Well, I will propose that is accepted, subject to my proposed amendment of the point around Middle Mill. Do I see someone to second this fantastic report? Thank you very much, Councillor Moffat. And do I see all those in favour of the report? It looks like unanimous. Yep, it's unanimous. Great. Good. Thank you. Okay. Right. We are now moving on to discussions around Mill Road. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, so the thrust of this is that 5 members of this authority wrote to me raising concerns around the Mill Road site, and to loosely contextualise it for those that are watching that aren't aware of the detail, as I understand it, the site in question used to be the Colchester rugby pitches, and the hope many moons ago was to sell the rugby pitches for development opportunity, which would include housing, affordable housing, potential medical centre, at the time a potential community facility and office space as well. And if that all happened, that would be really useful because, of course, there are loan agreements in place which have facilitated the fantastic new rugby pitches and Northern Sports Park, or as my children call it, the cycle tracks. And they are fantastic, and hats off to all those involved in getting that off the ground and in running it now. However, the councillors in question who are concerned about Mill Road are rather worried that in their perception things aren't moving quick enough on it, and we have had, for example, the heat network holes drilled, and that perhaps didn't go according to plan, and we are now, as I've previously mentioned, servicing some debt on the new facilities, and yet we have a very, very significant asset potentially to realise in Mill Road at the moment. So that's kind of my loose introduction to it. And I understand from the monitoring officer that there is some level of detail that ought to be discussed in private tonight because it is commercially sensitive, and I absolutely respect that, and we can do that. But before we do that, I think we should also have a discussion for the benefit of the record of where we're at, and to give councillors on this panel the chance to ask questions, and those questions may or may not be able to be answered. And Councillor Corey, you are, as I affectionately call you a different word, but you are the portfolio holder for resources. I wondered if you wanted to join us at this point and take the lead and say what you can and bring in the appropriate officers to support you. And of course, the leader, we're very grateful that you're here, and no doubt you will have much to add to the discussion. So just a reminder that obviously this is a public open session, and it might be that we do need to move into private session to discuss the commercially sensitive aspects.
Councillor Smith now wanting to speak as visiting councillor. See Councillor Dundas who was ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I think we'll have Councillor Smith, who wishes to speak specifically to this item. Then we will invite Councillor Dundas to speak, and I can see that also the Deputy Leader of the opposition group is here, and I'll give her an opportunity to say anything if she would like. That's only fair. Sorry. Great. Okay. Right. Thank you, Councillor Corey, for joining us. And let's try and, well, I'll use my eyes to welcome you in if you wish to say something, but let's try and keep it focused to start with. And I'm going to reiterate it. There may well be things that officers or that Councillor Corey or the leader wish to say, but that their advice has been that it is commercially sensitive, and so that would have to happen in a private session. And I respect that may be the case, but to start off with, and I'd like to begin over there on my far left with Councillor Appleton. Do you have any questions of the resources portfolio holder on this item, sir?
Wasn't expecting that, but yeah, why not? I far away. It's not really too much around the financial side of things. I think that from a financial, moral and ethical perspective, I think having more affordable housing there is the right thing to do. I think I'd rather speak from as a ward councillor in Highwoods that's right on the periphery of this area, I think, and you know, on behalf of residents there, we're looking forward to that walk through to Northern Gateway, an evening, in the evening, cinema and restaurants and everything. And I just wondered if, as part of the development of this area, plans are being put in place to ensure that Highwoods residents will still be able to enjoy that walk in comfort and feel happy to do so. I'm sorry if that doesn't come across the right way, but I agree with the financial aspects. It's more about personal and perspective from the ward.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. So, yeah, we'll deal with the finances. We have a presentation from Patricia and from Lee to run through. You've seen most of that detail. Some of you as councillors have seen this detail a few times over, and we've tried to ensure we've got answers to all of those questions in more detail. So we'll come to that. So I appreciate your question is much more holistic. And that is absolutely fair question as well. And that's one of the reasons the opposition have asked about this a number of times, because it's about the confidence of delivering on this site and how it links to the other Colchester Northern Gateway sites, being the leisure site in particular. And of course the confidence around that being delivered as well. So we have ownership of these sites up in Northern Colchester, whether it be Mile End or Highwoods, sort of straddling the two wards. And I would say that the economic sort of headwinds have been against us. Okay, so we have been delayed in bringing forward some of the projects at this Colchester Northern Gateway site, and of course the leisure site has taken time to get to where we are now, which is hopefully some good progress and news to come out soon. But your question around the site, we have the walk which has been put in place and has been completed, which is almost available to be used. Residents do use it, I know. But the site, as we are talking about tonight, will be developed up, ensuring that residents can still use that walkway. And as the development grows, then hopefully there'll be more life to that whole site. People will be safe to use that site. And as part of that site, open space will come as well. So hopefully your residents will be able to use the open space. Some residents may need the accommodation, the affordable homes there, and can get a home there. So the overall site will sort of be generated over time. The housing, as we plan, as we will talk about later, with it being affordable, put forward by a housing provider, we'll look into those options of who we believe can be the quickest delivery if through affordable housing. So that would be the first parts of the site coming forward. Your residents would also know, and some of them did really know and talked about it quite a lot at the time, the boreholes remain there, ready for the energy site to be, it needs something to plug into, it needs homes, it needs commercial lettings buildings to use the energy, but that sits there, and the residents did, we apologise, have to put up with the drilling of that and the boreholes, the work, but that has been done and it can easily be connected up. But we need the usage, we need people living there, we need businesses working there, and this is what this wider plan is about. I know the discussion, the questions have been focused more on the housing, and that will come forward tonight, and the economics of that. But overall, it's a site that will over time grow and become more lively and link to that Colchester Leisure World Northern Gateway site as well, which also should be very lively by the time these houses are built and people can go and use those great facilities there. I'll stop there because it sounds more like a brochure that I'm trying to...
Well, I wanted to give Councillor Appleton and you a nice platform to discuss, but actually it's Councillor Paul Smith to the hot seat first, then it will be Councillor Dundas and Councillor Naylor. Councillor Smith. Yeah, do that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Some of what...
Sorry, Councillor Smith, just a quick intervention from the clerk around the matter.
Apologies. I just wanted to add to the Chairman's words about confidentiality, and as panel members have received confidential materials in the run-up to this meeting, which are purely for the members of the panel, as they have expanded access to commercially sensitive documents. I just wanted to just remind everyone, please don't mention any details from those documents. I know almost 99% sure that nobody would, but I thought I wanted to get that on record.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I do obviously have a slight problem in that some of the aspects I wanted to address involved financial matters. So perhaps you would allow me to come back when we're in closed session as well.
I'm sure I will.
Thank you very much. I think what we're seeing tonight with the call-in is actually very much of a political decision. It's what sort of council we should be. Should we be a small council that does its statutory duties, minimising expenditure and income? Or should we have a strategic vision, a place-setting vision, to try and make the place better? And I feel, in all honesty, this is a political divide. There are those in Reform and elsewhere who go for the smaller council option. There are those on this council, the administration and its supporters over the past few years in the Green Party and in the Labour Party, who see a more strategic role, that we should be using our resources to tackle the problems on a wider area, which means sometimes looking beyond the sheer finances of it. Now, that view has been endorsed by full council. 2 years ago, there was a budget proposal put forward by the opposition that we should sell the site. They also proposed that we should scrap our investment in buying housing. That was rejected. This year, again, a similar proposal came forward, only this time instead of scrapping the housing, they wanted to take millions of pounds out of the housing budget. Again, that was rejected. Those were political decisions by the council, and those decisions had majority support, whether we agree with them or not. Now, you and I, Chair, know a lot about the democratic process. We've both been in the case of being on the wrong end of the democratic process. We've both lost our seats. And we took stock. We did not demand a recount, come back, ask the populace to storm the town hall in true Donald Trump style. We respected the democratic process. And what I feel this committee is being asked this evening, if the objections that have been put forward by those calling the motion go through, is to overturn the democratic decisions, that the council has a view of how it wants to develop this area strategically for the benefit of the people of Colchester. I will come on later to the financial arguments, but we've heard the moral arguments already about why we need more affordable housing. And affordable housing of mixed tenure, it won't all be for rent, some of it will be for purchase as well. That's fine. In that location will be ideal. And it will also be speedy. Because if we sold to a developer, it could be land banked. It could be land banked for many, many years. We may get 30% affordable housing, or we may not, because the developer might find it's not viable. We've had that happen far too often. What, in fact, we do, though, is if we control the fact by the sale to a registered social landlord, they will have to spend it quickly because they'll have got grant funding from Homes England. Fortunately, we have a government at the moment that is committed to house building and is looking for projects just like this, so we could get the homes built quickly. That is very important. If we leave it to the market, we're just left with the market building what the market wants. If we take the strategic decisions, which I believe is exactly what is being proposed here, we can get the best results for all the people of Colchester. We can get the local homes for our local families that people need, rather than what the developer thinks we should have. So I think that it is a clear decision. It's a moral decision, it's a political decision, and when we come on to the money side of it, there is also a compelling financial case. Because as we know, councillors, there's a deficit at the moment in the council's finances. The total overspend this year almost exactly equates to the extra spending on temporary accommodation. If we had more units of affordable housing for rent, we'd be spending less on temporary accommodation, because some of those families might move directly in, many more would move into the properties that had been vacated by people who did move in. And that is surely something that is great, and someone where next time the leader says, and where do you see yourselves in 6 months' time, the answer won't be stuck here waiting for another 2 years, but actually, yes, we're moving to a new property that the council is getting built for us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Dundas, the hot seat has been warmed up for you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I can assure you we'll mention some figures, but there's nothing which isn't publicly available and can't be derived from published documents. So if we get into details later, that's fine, but that'll have to be a confidential session. But I want to begin by thanking you and the panel for listening this evening. Just to set some context, the entire Northern Gateway project, both north and south, residential, commercial and leisure, is by far the biggest project the council has taken on for many years. Yeah, financially it dwarfs any other single project. And as ever with these things, we could argue figures, but if we use published figures from various sources, all on the council's website, such as the February 25 budget, monitoring reports and outturn reports, one from Tuesday at Governance and Audit, the total cost in losses in the 24-25 financial year for both north and south is between just over 4 million and under 5 million pounds. And to put it into perspective, in the last financial year, between 28% and 33% of the council's entire council tax take was spent on losses relating to Northern Gateway. Those figures aren't confidential. They can be derived from public documents by anyone with a calculator. The breakdown, though, is potentially commercially sensitive, so I'm not going to go further than that, but I can back them up, and it's pretty simple maths to do it. And I say there are two figures. I've crossed out, I had dispute written here, but I said there's been a public discussion between myself and the leader of the council over the element of the cost due to the site being considered tonight, officially known as Colchester Northern Gateway South, snappy name, which he has acknowledged as being around 1.8 million per year, and I have been saying it's as high as 2.5 million a year. I suspect a long analysis of this isn't a productive use of our time. What I will say is our figure was signed off by the Section 151 officer as valid for budget amendments we put forward in February 2025. I stand by my figures, but for the purposes of tonight, I will use the lower figure, and hopefully we can all agree, whichever one you use, it is a large amount of money, which is a minimum, just that element, of 12% of our entire council tax lost last year on just the Southern project under consideration now. And this is the background why I think it is an important matter for you to consider and why I have brought it to scrutiny. And I have to reiterate, this is just tonight about Northern Gateway South. No doubt you'll look at the rest of the project at some point in the future. But we're talking about the Mill Road site or the rugby club or whatever you want to call it. Just to be clear, we're all talking about the same piece of land. Now, the original scheme, as has been said, it really wasn't a bad concept 10 years ago. It aimed to deliver a new sports park, a new rugby club, 350 houses, a lot of offices, a new Highwoods Community Centre, remember that? possibly a new health facility, and all at no net cost and maybe even a profit for the council. The basic concept was to move the rugby club to the new site and the old site be sold as housing, and the receipts from the development pay off the short-term loans. However, the end result is, although we did eventually get the sports park, we have ended up with no housing or anything else and a £30 million debt. The actual amount is £30,571,526, and that figure was sent to all councillors on February the 25th this year as part of the MRP schedule prior to the budget meeting. The cost of meeting the interest payments and repayments of this are being financed from the council's revenue or service budget. It is this total figure the leader and I have had a good discussion about, but again, in the spirit of compromise, I will use the 1.8 million, but I still think the 2.5 million is justifiable. And it is for this reason that for 2 years in a row, the Conservatives have proposed budget amendments to sell the site, pay off the debts, cut the interest bill, and put the savings back into services. Now, these have always been rejected, and in fact, at the February budget meeting, the leader of the Labour group said we should never relinquish the site, and I did check and listen to the recording this afternoon to check I was telling the truth, so I presume Labour are against any sale at all. So, in some respects, actually, we've moved towards some agreement. After 2 years of saying no, the Liberal Democrat administration have accepted the basic premise even of the Conservative budget amendments to dispose the site. I do welcome that as progress. But that brings us down to how we sell it, who we sell it to, and what price we get for it. And this evening it is about you scrutinising how the process to arrive at those three decisions have been carried out, and satisfy yourself they have been done thoroughly by asking for and scrutinising the evidence. And I think there are several areas that you need to look at. On April the 8th, the council announced that they were selling the site for affordable housing, but no details to whom. I could probably take a guess, but I won't say any names. You are therefore doing what you're entitled to do. You are scrutinising a decision which has actually already been taken. And I think some of the questions you need to ask tonight are along the following lines. 1, how was the purchaser chosen, and how was it decided based on evidence that selling for affordable housing was the right financial decision? How and to whom was the site advertised? What offers came back? Who declined to bid? Frankly, you need to see the adverts, you need to see the offers, and you need to see who declined to bid and see if they explain why. 2, you need to ascertain the difference, if any, between selling to a developer who will build only affordable housing and to any other buyer, be it a negative or positive figure. I'm not saying we shouldn't sell for 100% affordable, but it needs to be evidence what the cost or benefit of doing that is against other options. 3, you need to look at the planning permission which exists there, which is for 350 homes. The planning permission in place is not for 100% affordable, but for 30% affordable and the rest open market. It was also meant to be a high quality scheme of relatively expensive homes at low density. That doesn't sound very affordable to me, because 80% of a lot is still a lot. So you need to work out what is actually going to be built there. Are they going to apply for new planning permission? What's it going to look like? Is the density going to change? And how long will that take? Because we're talking about expediency. Is there going to be a new planning application? 4, our current planning policy is usually to pepperpot social and affordable housing, specifically to avoid some of the issues we've had in the past, particularly developers putting affordable housing in, how can I put it, the less positive areas of a development, and also to avoid social issues which have been experienced in some developments in the past. So does this scheme comply with the council's policy on how we distribute affordable housing amongst other housing? 5, now claims have been made that this will alleviate the temporary housing shortage in Colchester, although I'm not sure how many people in that position can afford even 80% of an expensive home. However, I accept any house adds to the national housing stock and potentially frees up others. But making a specific link to Colchester is tenuous unless these houses are restricted to those with local connections. So a specific question is whether all these houses will be marketed via and restricted to only those people who qualify to be a member of Gateway to Home Choice. If not, they are not going to be necessarily local. 6, I would ask you to ask for clarification as to what is happening to the £10 million expenditure on a junction Councillor Goss infamously called the car crash, as this does not appear to be needed for the development of this land. It is not linked to the housing development, it's linked to offices. 7, I know you have received a copy of the legal advice as to whether selling this asset for potentially less than the market value breaches the Local Government Act. In that advice, it is not clear what information was provided to the firm concerned, but I would suggest at the very least the panel ask for and receive a copy of everything provided to them and what questions were asked. You're quite entitled to do that. Furthermore, in the advice it makes reference to it being permissible to market the land for 100% affordable, but it does still make it clear it must be a proper competitive process with a proper valuation obtained. So let's see that evidence that it was offered to a number of different providers. 6, and the almost final question you might like to ask is why was the sale announced on April the 8th when the opinion on whether what was being done was legal was not obtained until May the 8th? And finally, Councillor Corrie made reference to the heat network and possibly reusing the boreholes. That only works if you have a customer. So can we have assurance that a condition of the sale will be that all the houses have to be connected to and use the heat network as was originally envisaged in the original scheme, and I believe is actually in the planning permission? Because if they're not going to use it, from day one, that scheme is dead, because there will be no houses to ever use it. Once they've got gas boilers in or heat pumps on electricity, they're not then going to connect up to a heat system or put new pipes in, are they? So, Chair and Councillors, this is probably the largest financial decision this Council will take prior to being abolished. And all we've seen thus far is a press release saying they're doing it. Most councillors have seen nothing else. You need to see the documents, you need to see the offers, you need to see the valuation calculations, not just the bottom line figures. You need to see what was provided to legal advisors. You're quite entitled to do all of that, and you should. We have to get this debt paid, and we have to cut the huge finance costs which are strangling our budgets and swallowing up residents' council tax on interest and repayments they pay to us for services. You must verify best value as being obtained. You must scrutinise how this decision was arrived at and see all the evidence. That is your role as a panel, and it is all of our role as councillors. I think that's probably enough from me for the time being. I get the moral and social arguments, but they need to be backed up by knowing what the financial cost of doing that is versus other options. And you need to see that that has been researched properly, and you need to see that the evidence is available to back up those statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Okay, just to reiterate, we cannot discuss about any details of anything associated with the legal advice in public session. I've made a note very specifically of your pertinent and salient questions there. I see that the leader wishes to respond initially, but perhaps Councillor Corrie, you would like to lead on this, and I will help you out in the first instance by just surmising that Councillor Smith did make a very good point about land banking, and we all know what that means, and we've all seen evidence of it. So I think that was a very real point. I'm going to give you that, but there's some stuff there for you to answer, Councillor Corrie, from Councillor Dundas. If you don't do it all now, I've made a note of it. I'm sure it will come out in the course of this evening, maybe in private, but let's try now.
Thank you, Chair. I think quite a bit in detail will need to be in private. Some of the sort of basic detail I can try, and of course the leader indicated, and Patricia and Lee are on the call as well. So first of all, just to sort of be sure we're talking about the same thing, there was a press release about the approach we are taking. It was not a press release about the land being up for sale and it being sold. That is not what has happened. This is the approach we are taking. Okay, so I think that there was a bit of a misconception there that we've gone to market, we've sold it, and it's with a provider. That is not the case. the press release would have been about the process we are taking, which we are going to market this to housing providers in order to get affordable housing on that site. So I just
This is in regard to April the 8th versus May the 8th point specifically?
Yes, yeah, that as well, that's included, but it's a basic point to begin with, that we've not gone through this process, got a provider, it's sold. No, it's about us announcing this is the process we are taking, okay? So that's where we are, much further back than perhaps was just suggested. This has also gone through the members' estates group, so we've set up that to ensure more transparency and more involvement and more member engagement across all parties. So councillors have been involved in this, have seen the finances, have seen that approach and that process, not just on this particular piece to do with the housing, but the whole piece of Colchester Northern Gateway South, as well as other parts of our estate as well, because that's the way we're moving forward with the corporate landlord model, with our ethos of being more engaged with members and more transparent with members. And thank you, Patricia, as our officer, our lead officer on that, for doing that. And Lee's expertise has been really helpful on this particular site, engaging with members as well. In terms of the financial costs, Councillor Dundas went through that, and the leader and he have discussed those different costs. But one of the best ways to address those costs is to get development on that site. And the quickest way would be through a housing provider, as Councillor Smith did say, not whether or not a developer would land bank or not, but actually housing providers in these times when we're not seeing enough housing being built. And during the past recessions are the quickest to get to building houses because of the grants available and because they're mainly going to rent rather than to sale. So there's less of a market driver there, and it can be built quicker. So that would allow us to deal with some of the costs mentioned and to get that site developed. And secondly, it's the secondary costs. As again, Councillor Smith outlined, our biggest budget pressure remains the constant increase in the cost of temporary accommodation. The rising need to provide housing for people that outstrips the housing that we have, as well as right to buy, taking out of the market our housing, or taking to the market, but taking out of our closed market of social accommodation. And as much as we build housing, it's about level in terms of it being taken away. So we're building homes we're building council homes, but they're being taken away at just the same rate because of right to buy. So we are only seeing the increasing number of people presenting as homeless and the increasing costs of that, partly because, Councillor Smith didn't say it this time, but has said before, when we're trying to put families into a temporary accommodation, if we can't do it through Beyond the Box and the good opportunities we've provided, then through hotels, families end up in 2 rooms. We get 1 payment from government, not 2. That payment does not cover the cost in the first place, let alone it being double if it's a larger family that needs to be split up. So we're seeing multiple costs, not just a gradual increase. It continues to leap and leap. So therefore, by delivering affordable homes on this site, that will help us target that increasing budget pressure in our revenue budget. And Councillor Dundas talked about housing for Colchester people on the gateway choice, which does work with other councils as well. But yes, that's what we'll be doing, because there's no point saying we're going to address the housing crisis if we suddenly allow them to be taken off the market elsewhere. And it's mainly to rent in order to address the affordable housing crisis and the waiting list we have. I'm sure Councillor Smith will come back and add anything to that, but that's as much as I can explain there. So I think in terms of public explanation, that's as much as I can give now, Chair, if that helps. And I'm sure the leader...
That is helpful. Thank you. I see the leader does indicate.
Thank you. And look, this is for the committee to make their decision, isn't it, saying the obvious. We are generally here just to try and be helpful. And because this is a public issue, it's been made public, whether that's for raw political reasons or genuine concerns. I suspect it's a mix of both. But whatever is the mix, whatever the reasons, is out there. And so in this public session, I want to address, round out with respect to Mark, some of the points that have been made and just remind us of words I know, watching the faces around the committee, really rung true when Councillor Smith was speaking at the beginning. You know, it's a reminder to us that our decisions matter at a human level. And what we do, how fast we do it, which in many respects I think is as much the decision point around which we might gather as anything else, that matters to the lives of hundreds of households. And one of the things I say to Colchester Borough Homes is you need to translate 450 households into people. This is hundreds of children. This is hundreds of adults who have had a terrible time to get to that position and are facing many months, many years of uncertainty. So when we talk about cost, you know, respectful that actually I believe across the chamber we're not so far apart each from the other on this and some other things too. There's a huge social cost. So we won't talk numbers tonight, but you can do some in your head. If you go and rent a room or 2 rooms in a hotel or in B&B, you'll have an idea what that will cost. You end up in 25, 50,000 pounds a year easily. Start to do some numbers. If we can get 100 households drawn out of those circumstances into proper homes, and this is a proper site, which is, and I want assurance to ward members here, there's 2 will have a real interest in this. This is going to be done as a place of quality, to a standard, as a place people will want to live. The eventual scheme, I expect, Chair, will be one that's available in the richest sense of affordable, helping key workers and shared homes. I suspect all of that, getting people onto the housing ladder, will eventually be part of the package. Even if that were not true, providing homes for hundreds of people, they're no longer, let's be blunt about it, people who are just not finding their way in life. These are people from every part of society who've had rough, tough times and lost their way. So cost, yes, is important. Councillor Dundas is right to point this out, but there's a social cost. A couple more points if you give me the moment. So we talk numbers, we're not doing that too much in open session. We should talk about words. So cost is another word for investment. We have invested in this site. It is true that costs us money because we have to repay. That's what we're also doing. This is not lost money. It is true there is an interest charge, but we are repaying debt. We're preparing for parcels to be sold downstream. Got every reason to think some substantial recovery of investments, and we have secured by that investment for a cost, for a price, a fantastic set of facilities on the other side of the A12, part of this wider development to which you referred earlier, for a benefit for the health and well-being. And the reason I came tonight was not just got many capable colleagues here, but I just wanted to be really clear. It's a central agreed policy of this council to place a value upon people, upon their health and their well-being, their place in society, their place in life. There is no question you can run a critique of the length of time, pandemic, market supply, all those reasons and the changing market have delayed us, but you can run a critique of that, it's fair. What is not, or what is much less reasonable, is to have this discussion ahead of formal scrutiny, before we've made the decisions, in following through on those agreed policies cross-chamber. Look, I will stop at that, but I hope I've rounded out some of the response. We had the assurance about gateway to homes, and I hope that will help Councillor Dundas and anybody listening. But the one I want to repeat is, this is not, let's be to the point about sink estates. This is about providing the good places to live, complementary to existing communities, on which we can take some pride at that point, as fast as we can, and this is the route. We all, regardless of party, should feel some pride in how we are looking after our place. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Shortly I'll be calling up Councillor Sarah Naylor, but before that, Councillor Corey.
Thank you. I just wanted to make one more point. I'm aware that the presentation will really help. I'm also aware that we'd have to go into private session for that. So I know you're trying to have as much discussion before that as possible, which I appreciate. The one point I wanted to make, just sort of publicly, without saying figures, is I think so far it sounds as if we're going to give away a site just for the social homes for low value. That's not the case. We're looking at the values here of what we could afford in terms of giving to a private developer and moving on, leaving it to them, or going with a housing provider. And what we'll see in the figures is it's much of a muchness, and actually, I'm just saying that in the round, we can get the more clearer judgments and valuations from our officers and the evidence. But it's actually about good value and delivering for our affordable homes. So that's what I wanted to just make clear. It's not as if we're going, oh, we desperately must tackle this issue and therefore we're giving away at a really low value. No, we're getting good value and we're delivering not just sustainable value into the future, but delivering homes for people in need. So I just wanted to make that clear because it may not have sounded right to people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Naylor, thank you for being so patient. And after yourself, I will continue with panel members on my left here. 5 minutes. Okay, Councillor Naylor, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I just want to take a moment to say there's a lot of emotion around this debate, but of course, scrutiny doesn't scrutinise emotion. Scrutiny scrutinises the decisions that are made by the Council on behalf of all residents, though that doesn't obviously say that we don't recognise the particular distress of those who are homeless. So that's why scrutiny meets. It's not purely in the interests of a small number of extremely unfortunate families that we all wish were in permanent homes. I want to start by just acknowledging the professional expertise of Councillor Sunnox. His detailed work has brought us here tonight, and I thank him for that, as I think we all will, because it's extremely important that we do indeed scrutinise and ask ourselves, is the money that taxpayers provide, it's not our money, being spent in the correct way? We have a duty to scrutinise this, and it can't be set aside by political choices. So I do disagree with Councillor Smith's characterisation earlier that these are politically motivated questions. I suggest that there might be a different reason for that. I also want to remind the committee that full council has voted on transparency, and there is a motion that was accepted that we all agreed it was the right thing to do to hear absolutely as much as possible in public session. So I do urge you, Chair, to please resist any calls that are too cautious to go into private session, when in your judgment you feel if there is a balance of judgment to be taken, it ought to land on the public side. I do share Councillor Smith's concern about the homeless families, as we all do. I can't imagine what it's like waiting day to day for that property to move to. But if we are to follow the logic of Councillor Smith around building affordable homes, then I can only conclude that had the original plan been exercised, then a significant proportion of those families would very likely be living in a 3-bedroomed home in Mill Road now, in the affordable 30% affordable homes. And the debt for Colchester Sports Park would also have been paid. I understand the discomfort of Councillor Smith, who would rather understand this as a political issue, rather than acknowledge that the administration has failed to deliver the original housing plan. However, this committee has a duty to consider the wider issue and disregard an emotive dismissal of genuine and relevant questions. We have a duty to act in the best interests of all our residents. If this plan had been exercised efficiently and prudently, there would be more money for spending on services right now, as well as fewer adults and children who should have been housed in those affordable homes that I just referred to. Neither would we be spending, and I'm going to use the figure that we believe to be accurate because the monitoring officer, Section 151 officer said it was, neither would we be spending £200,000 a month on interest, a cost of up to £2.5 million a year for the 30 million that was borrowed to build the sports park. That debt should have been long paid, not a millstone round the necks of the residents, all residents. Many of our households are struggling who are not actually homeless, in that they may be close to it. Every penny that's not spent wisely comes out of their pockets and purses. They are also increasingly struggling. Legal opinion was given in May, but shouldn't that, Chair, have been sought in April before the Council publicised its favoured approach to housing, regardless of any decisions having been taken? That in itself is a decision. We cannot ignore the duty to get best value for residents who elect us. We should not expect council taxpayers to take a hit on the value of the land because a plan wasn't efficiently delivered in the first place. That would be to compound the original expensive mistake. The reality is this council has demonstrated it isn't capable of delivering housing on this site. Hence, at full budget, we proposed very sensible suggestions to frankly help them get out of the hole they'd created. Thank you, Chair. I hope you consider these important points in your deliberations committee. Thank you.
Councillor Corey, do you wish to come back to anything that you've heard there?
To be honest, there's quite a few historic issues there. There's a lot of work that needs to take place on a site. That can be to do with highways and the fact that they said that junction needs to be worked on before you go ahead and develop this site. Instead, over time, we've done work, Lee Rainsforth in particular has done work to decouple the highways need from us being able to build houses. We couldn't have done that before. So it's not as if we could have suddenly transformed this site overnight. I think that this is being suggested in public session as if it's a miracle that could have happened. It's not. We also need to take into account the economic situation of this country. Okay? And during the last 5-6 years, it has not been able to, we haven't been able to deliver on those plans. We've had hospital, I've been there, dealing with providers coming forward and then saying, no, we cannot because of the economic situation. Our backers will not come forward to fund this, okay? And it was not a Liberal Democrat government that was in place. And to make another point, you also, Sarah, your colleagues, the Conservative Party, were in power here during this time as well. So this plan has been on the desk of Councillor Dundas when leader, and I think too much political capital is trying to be made out of this. It is a complex site that we have been working on to get here. Would I have liked to have been here a year ago saying this is exactly where we are and we're going ahead? Yes, I would. I admit that, absolutely. We have seen some delays, but that is not because we've been sitting here saying, oh, what are we going to do? We're going to just sit there. No, we want housing there. We want affordable housing there. We want to deliver on this site. We want this site delivering economically. We want businesses on this site. We've seen, due to the market, we're going to have less of the businesses that we thought we might have done originally because the market has changed. So it should not be a political football. I understand there's a decision about whether or not we go ahead completely with affordable housing or go completely ahead with the developer. That could be seen as political. But quite honestly, I sit here looking at it and I see a number of logical things piling up that just tip it in the balance of going for this affordable housing site. And I think it's important to look at the different values. And again, looking at the values, it does not say we're going to get, for example, 30 million from from a developer for these small parcels of housing compared to getting 1 million from a housing provider. That is not what we're talking about here. It is not a drastic difference, and we will go into those figures. It is about a number of logical points stacking up. You won't hear Councillor King raving about a political party when he goes and talks about issues. He deals with things in consensus, okay? We are not here trying to stamp a Liberal Democrat mark on this particular development. It is not political. What is political is us scrutinising each other, absolutely, and that's what I'm here for this evening. But I'm not going to go through the historical issues, blame one thing or another. I have said the economy, yeah, it wasn't working well. So I'll stop there, Chair, because you've given me a generosity of explaining myself. But I just wanted to say, I think depoliticise it to some extent, look at the logic in front of us, and I'm confident that the logic is, on balance, to take this direction.
I thought you were going to mention locking down the country for 2 years might have had an impact on all of our lives, but I'll give you that one. The leader.
Thank you. Just one point of fact. So a couple of times reference has been made to the legal opinion, which members have seen, and the timing of it. From my perspective, it's entirely appropriate that we don't routinely go and get legal opinion as to what we're doing is legal. Because we do the right things according to, a mountain or procedure and process, at the heart of which is test and challenge, so that we're doing the right thing. Getting advice was because that approach had been, as we addressed today, has been described as illegal. That's the suggestion. And to get an independent view was what I asked for, because I didn't think it was reasonable to put our officers in the position of trying to defend, by reference to case law, what they knew to be appropriate, which was really about value generation. And I hope we can go through this in the detail needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like other panel members to have a chance to put questions to the portfolio holder and officers if desired. Councillor Moffat, do you have anything to ask? Okay, thank you. Councillor Scordis. Thank you. Councillor Law. Okay, Councillor Sunix.
Yes, I do have some questions to be asked, and they can certainly be answered in public, and I think it's really important that they are. These questions are all questions that can be answered in public. First of all, I've been behind putting this together, and my intention has not been to reduce the number of social housing or affordable houses that are built. That is not the intention. The intention is this site's been sat vacant for 4 years now. In the development world, the day the rugby club had been moved, the bulldozers would have been moving in for something else. In council world, that doesn't happen. And I understand, don't worry, I understand more than anyone how development can be delayed. But that's why we were pushing for the private sector to do it. Now we've got to the stage where the council is trying to sell some of it, but it's got to the stage, and my first question, why on earth not put it out to the open market? Why on earth not put it out to the open market and then do your social housing elsewhere? You've got an allocation of 45,000 square metres of office on this, on another part of this same site. 45, that's for offices for 4,500 jobs, which are never going to be built. People are not building offices like that now. That could be 450 flats. Why are you uprooting the planning permission for this, which was decided, which was given in 2021? It took about 3 or 4 years to get it. Huge democratic process to get it. And suddenly, on April the 8th, along comes an announcement from the portfolio holder that we're going to do 100% social, or rather 100% affordable, when the permission was for 30%.
Councillor Silence, is that question one?
That's question one.
Shall we take it in turn? Because I suspect you might have several.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
There were two, so I'll take both. So why not put it up on open market, and why uprooting the planning that we've already got? Well, you just answered the second question, because you said, let's change the planning on the office side. Okay, so you answered your question. I believe that we will look at the planning. That is an outline planning application for the entire site. So it is always going to be the case that you'll come forward with a detailed planning application. So we will come forward with a detailed planning application, and I will take your intimation and mine back that, yes, we will push the numbers, and we will look at flexing that site in the best way possible. To go back to your first one, why not put it out to open market? So what we've done is soft market testing. We've looked at the valuations that we believe we would get from open market and affordable and a mix, etc. And those are in the documents, those are in the packs for this evening. And we believe on both a basis of value, and that is short term in terms of getting money for the site, and in terms of longer term, the secondary effect of reducing temporary accommodation costs. On value, it stacks up. And secondly, on the social side, we believe delivering it to the market of housing providers enables us to tick that box in helping deliver affordable homes. There's a third angle, in a sense that we have greater control to be able to say, let's get on and do that, and in that way, and in this particular mix of development. And I suppose the fourth thing we've talked about is it will deliver quicker. I think from your experience, you'd understand at this point in time, a housing provider is likely to deliver quicker using housing grants to get on, not waiting for market value to change. I'm genuinely asking, would you believe that is an honest approach at this point, that a housing provider probably could get to market or get to delivery quicker at this point in time? So question back to you.
I'm very, very complimented that you ask it. The quickest way of doing this is take the present permission, which is for fairly low density, high quality, 70% private housing, sell it to a house builder, so trouser a large amount of money, receive a large amount of money, I mustn't use the language of the East End, receive a large amount of money which can then be recycled into good things. That's the quickest way of doing it. Changing a planning permission from 30% housing to 100%, you're going to have to redesign the whole thing. It's going to take another year of messing around. And restricting it to a registered social landlord, this is my next question. The suggestion that we're going to get better value by restricting it to registered social landlord simply goes against everything everyone knows. It's there in the RICS statements. It's there in all the arguments that developers put forward when they come forward and try and have to do less affordable housing. It is absolutely flying in the face of convention. And for some reason, Colchester's decided they're going to reinvent convention and sell it to, or restrict the marketing to an RSL. Why on earth not? If an RSL really can produce the best result, why not put it to the open market and see if that's true? So speed and money point towards open market.
So the question I directly asked was about being able to deliver the housing. And I believe a housing provider at this point, a social housing provider, could deliver housing quicker at this point. Back to the value. I understand what you say, that there is the general logic that a developer selling to the private market could make more money on a particular site. It does depend where and how. However, there are two things at play here. One, there is the housing grants that the housing provider will be able to get. That is doubled by the fact that this current government are looking to provide affordable homes and will give accelerated monies to help with that. Secondly, housing providers, I'm not making any confirmation or any declaration here about who will get this site, but we have been talking with, as William will know, Latimer Clarion Group for the Tendring Garden Community Borders. And their model is that they own the houses and they rent over time, and over a 30-40 year period, that actually increases more value, gains more value than it would be just a housing developer coming in, going off quickly, leaving the site. So housing providers can, as a registered social landlord, look at their model for 40 years and go, right, we're going to be able to generate this amount of money, and therefore it can be valuable and valuable enough for them to be able to match on this site the same as we would get from a market developer. So those are my answers to you there. I'll just go back to the point that we would need a more detailed planning application because there's currently an outline planning application. So whether it is a market landlord, a market developer, or a social landlord, we are still going to have to get a more detailed planning application. So both sets of developer would have to do that process. So it would take the same amount of time to do the planning. But I agree with you. We agree on actually the planning. We need to make more of that site from the original outline planning. So in both cases, on both our arguments, it's going to take that detailed planning and some changes, and we agree on that at least.
Good. Closing divides. The two reasons you gave us for restricting it to RSLs. One is that RSLs get more grants, and the second is that somehow their models, their 40-year models, work better, and I don't have any idea how that they make that work, and that sounds to me like some eyewash, quite honestly. The grants, why on earth are they getting more grants? We've already had, we've already had a HIF grant on this very site, haven't we, of 5.5 million, all public domain stuff, with milestones in it which have not been met, and I think that's public domain stuff as well. Why on earth is the government going to give us more grant, even more grant to do it? The total grant they've seemed to have produced for this site is about 12.5 million, plus another 5 million for Junction 28 I saw somewhere. So I don't know quite what the grant situation is, and I guess my question is, why on earth do we think that they're going to produce even more grant so that we get a better value for an RSL than we would from the private house builder?
Thank you. So, yes, we've got a HIF grant, Housing Infrastructure Grant. I think I can make 3 points here. So, yes, we've got a grant in order to deliver housing, generally deliver housing, okay? Secondly, if we come forward with completely affordable homes, the government would want to encourage more of that. So that's where we could see a further grant, okay, to deliver all of those as affordable to help tackle that affordable housing crisis problem. And the third thing is if we go ahead with a developer and we don't follow all of the different criterion laid out in that HIF grant in the first place, there could be in danger of losing some of that HIF grant. So we've got to make sure we follow the criterion of that original grant. As you say, we have been delayed, and we have spoken to Homes England to ensure we can maintain and keep that grant. I think when we argued this before, if you were to sell the whole site off, that's when we would have to give back that HIF grant, because it's not necessarily us delivering the housing in the way we said. We're talking slightly differently now, and I hope we would not have to return that grant. We can meet most of the criterion, whether we went to a market or an affordable provider. But all I'm saying is that there is a risk if we don't follow the procedures that were in place and agreed. But I've made clear, and I'll repeat, we could attract more grant for that total affordable because we're delivering on the aims of the government and what they want to do, and therefore we could gain.
Yes, I would suggest that you need to be very firm on the grants and before restricting it to RSLs. And so I've got to frame it as a question, haven't I? But I would think that making that decision to only market to RSLs is a very important one, and it seems to go against the law, and we'll discuss that privately. It seems to be that you're selling at an undervalue. And the argument is you're not selling at an undervalue because you've got these grants. So before you make that decision, you need to be jolly sure that those grants are there. Is that all? I guess the question is it all tied down? Has the government agreed not to reclaim the 5.5 million? Has have the further grants been underwritten properly?
I'm going to jump in here because I just want to try and extract something out. So, folks, my experience in this field is extremely limited, and I know I'm speaking with people in the room that have dealt with multi-million-pound commercial, former town hall in Manchester. I've been in there; it's exquisite. Your words, I think. I've bought and sold 5 very humble residential houses in my life. That's my experience of dealing with property. But I do understand how it works in a competitive environment just for a humble home. And what I can't get my head around at the moment, I'm sorry, Councillor Corey, but I'm going to ask the question as well. How do we know the true value of that site if we haven't put it out to the market with a date on for bids? Just in the same way that, for example, we didn't really quite, well, how do we know what the Abro site is worth? Well, the MOT put out a bidding system, and this authority bid for it. And we didn't get it, someone's got it, so that becomes the market value. How do we know what the market value is if we haven't got it to market? I can't get my head around that. I'm sorry, I just would like to understand. If it is a philosophical or a political move, and your belief fundamentally with the portfolio holder, with advice from officers, is that a housing provider will build out quicker and rent houses quicker, and you believe that will help the housing crisis, then that's a legitimate belief. But I still don't understand how you know the value of that site.
Okay, so as you said, those beliefs that I've laid out are strong beliefs based on evidence, but I will bring in Lee here because he's the expert, and as Lee readies himself, I'd ask Lee just to explain his background as well, his context, his expertise, and why I trust that. It is not based on my guesswork of what this site will be worth, absolutely not. I'm taking the evidence that Lee has gained, Patricia's indicated to us, so perhaps I'll hold Lee ready and maybe go Patricia first and then to Lee to help answer those questions. I've noted down some of it, I could come back, but officers, I think at this point, of course, we've got to be careful of financial competition and all the different numbers we've talked about, but I'll go to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. I think before I bring Lee in, I would just like to make the point and be very, very clear to all members. We are not selling at an undervalue. So we are openly marketing to the RSL sector. This is not an undervalue situation. We are not discounting the site. We are not reducing the value of the site. We are marketing the site to the RSL sector for 100% affordable housing. I think you mentioned earlier, Councillor Sunnix, about your intention was not to reduce the numbers of social housing on the site. A developer would put at a maximum 30% social housing. We're talking about 100% housing, affordable housing. So the developer, if indeed he did deliver 30%, and we know up and down the country that isn't happening, which is part of the contribution to the housing crisis for social housing, because it doesn't benefit the developer. So marketing this site, competitively marketing this site to the RSL market, who will attract grant for the delivery of these homes, will give you a market value for the site. This is not an undervalue situation. You are not discounting the site, and you are not offering this site for a peppercorn that other authorities do up and down this country for the delivery of social housing. The value isn't just about the capital receipt. The value is about the delivery of housing, the impact on the temporary housing bill that you are suffering from a revenue perspective. But I'd like to hand Lee. Could you please talk through, not the detail, we'll come on to that later, but the process that you've talked through with DS2 in terms of the assessment and the modelling that we'll be expecting when we get those tenders back through, please.
Absolutely. So in essence, we've done some soft market testing with the RSL market to establish land values. These are informal offers. They are all benchmarked on the same rates, but we don't go through a detailed analysis looking at weighting of different elements. We just purely looked at this very plain and simple. Everybody in there on a level playing field, best foot forward, informal bid. So no legal obligation whatsoever. And the data that we had back has proven that compared to the soft market testing that we did to PLC developers, we went to 4, that the ranges that we're expecting to get do outstrip that from a private developer. Does that answer the question satisfactorily, Patricia?
I think it would be useful for members to understand the evaluation, the development of the evaluation without going into the detail piece, because obviously that is commercially sensitive, but the fact that this will be on modelling in terms of determination of value in terms of the returns that we'll be getting. Thank you.
In essence, we have taken the range of informal offers received from the RPs and been out to a specialist consultant who I've used for a number of years. And that specialist consultant has reconfirmed that the informal bids received are realistic and deliverable.
Thank you, Lee.
Councillor Sonics.
Yes, the market value of something is the highest price that someone will pay for it. How on earth do you know that it's that you've attained the market value if you've only talked to RSLs? Yeah. This just has to go out. Surely there's procurement rules coming out of our ears saying we have to go out to the open market and get best value.
Yeah. So you've just said it there, Councillor Sonics, this is about best value, not necessarily best price. So value is more than just price. Value is also about the impact on homes, the delivery of 100% affordable housing, not a maximum of 30%. And the negotiations quite often will be much less than 30%, as we know. So this is about the delivery of 100% affordable homes. It's about the betterment in terms of the revenue position on the temporary housing bill budget. So value, best value, isn't just about maximum price, but what we will be able to show you through the analysis when we get into a private session, if that's agreed by members, the analysis and the comparison between what we've gleaned from the market in terms of the private sector market and the work that we've done in terms of the values for affordable housing from RP providers.
So from what you've said, we're running straight into Section 123. Section 123, Local Government Act 1972, I've checked it in a slightly sad and nerd-like way, is about monetary value and not social value. And, you know, we need a way around this. We need a way around it.
We have a way around it. It is perfectly legal. It's standard practice in delivering social housing, and we can come on to that, I think, later. We don't want to stray into that at the moment.
Well, Section 123 is all perfectly open. The general consent orders, all perfectly. There is social value in that one, but we're talking about figures much bigger than £2 million here. So Section 123 is quite clear. It's monetary value. And my question remains, and perhaps we're just going to have to leave it until the private section, how do we know that we're getting the best monetary value in accordance with Section 123 if we restrict the market to RSLs only?
We are perfectly eligible to go down the route that we are. The legal advice, as Councillor King has said, has been shared. You are perfectly eligible to do this. This is not illegal at all. We are not, back to my very first point, we are not selling at an undervalue. We are not discounting the site in any way, shape or form. We are putting this to a sector of the market in a competition to deliver 100% affordable housing. There are no private developers who would deliver 100% affordable housing on those two sites.
Okay, We have conveniently come to half time. It's 7:32. I'd like us to have a 15-minute break, please, and then we will return. So back here, please, at 7:47. Thank you.
Still an open session.
Still in open session. 7:47. Thanks, everyone.
Matt, are we good to go? Yeah.
Okay, good evening, folks. Welcome back. Thank you for your patience while we just had a comfort break. We are still in the public session where we are talking about an item known as Mill Road or Northern Gateway South. Both are applicable. Mr. Clark, do you just want to remind us of the process we're going through in the context of this being a public open session at the moment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to make sure that all members were aware. The process by which the panel can go into confidential session to discuss matters deemed exempt is for the panel itself to vote to do so. A motion to go into confidential session can be put forward by any member of the panel, and if it's seconded, then the panel will be asked to vote on that resolution to go into private session. Just wanted to clarify that so that everyone in attendance knows how it works.
Thank you for that clarity. We still haven't heard from Councillor Rowe in public, and I'm very happy to facilitate that now, and then we will take a view on whether or not we wish to move into a private session or whether we wish to go home. It's entirely up to us. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I will try to keep it quick. I agree with a lot of what already has been said. The thing I can't get my head around, and I think I need a bit more clarity on, is why we're not putting this out, why we're restricting the market. So under the General Disposal Consent 2003, where although we've discussed whether it has sort of social value, etc. on it, that's fine. But inside that legislation, it explicitly says that if the proposal exceeds £2 million as an undervalue, then the project must be signed off by the Secretary of State. So there's sort of a point where it has to be, there is a monetary value. We do care what the market value is. And it does explicitly say, unless I'm wrong, the market value inside it. So surely the market value is what we can extract the price of the land, the highest price of the land that we can get. So we would have to put that land out to tender. We would have to request that not just a restricted set of developers bid on it, but any developer bid on it. And if we're confident in our numbers, we should be able to provide a business case that says what we're planning to do, or what this council is planning to do, will not go under the £2 million value that the highest market price can provide. And considering, I can't get my head around why we're not doing that and why we're using soft value. And I genuinely think that this is a concern. So I'm going to ask again, why are we not going out to tender to full, and why are we only restricting it to the certain developers?
Councillor Corey.
So it strays into, again, conversations we can have in private about value. We believe, from what we've seen in terms of value, that going to registered housing providers on the open market would derive best value and would deliver on what we want to see at that site, which is housing up quickly and affordable housing that will deliver for us for the long term.
Thank you. So, in that case, I sort of put a challenge to you, prove me wrong then. In that case, I would like to see what the value is that we could possibly get, and I would like to see that put against your business case so that we can see. And I personally think that's the only way around this. You can't have a soft value, you need to have a hard value. We need to know what the full market value is. I know that we've had legal advice on this, and we've seen the answer to that legal advice. I don't believe that we've seen what was actually asked of the legal team. Can I put a proposal or make a recommendation that we vote on, that we see that the members of this committee and anyone else, or I suppose the members of the committee, can see the legal, the questions and any correspondence that we had with the legal team to understand in full where we stand on this. Because I think it's important for us look, taking the motion out of this, it's important for us to understand the process. If we get ourselves into a situation where legally we can be disputed, or a developer comes along and says, well, you know, we were restricted from bidding on this land, we want to, you know, I don't know, yeah, is that, sorry? JR, right, okay, yeah. So in that instance, we get ourselves in a situation where this will just push this out into further out, and we won't have a situation where we're building houses. So we will actually compound the problem that we're trying to solve if we don't do this properly. So it's really important that we understand and see the legal advice, and that we see the correspondence that we had with the legal team.
Leader?
Could I ask us all to remember that we're being watched and what we say? I know I'm not having any kind of crack, Tom. I understand that we all will, that desire to understand. It's, you know, that's why these conversations usually end up being of some quality, don't they? Because we've got a common and shared interest. I suggest personally that this is best done in the private session, but I want for the public session to be really clear. Apart from however much paperwork there is or may be exchanged, we do work on some understandings that we ask a fair question to get a fair answer, otherwise it's a falsehood and we're not working on that basis. So questions have been asked based upon the knowledge of this site. The legal response to that has been shared, and for those listening, because we can't go into its detail, we can and should say, it says that what we're doing is appropriate. Right? It's defensible on a number of different levels. It's not unusual. Right? It will not, because it's around the policy of the council to follow through in response to the need for social and affordable housing. To do that in a defensible way. I think it's also worth reminding ourselves, we are not yet in the position where all the facts resulting from the process that lies ahead will be able to be unveiled. I think there's a very fair point that needs to be said again, and Councillor Summings and I had the same discussion in the margins. When it comes through formally, rather than this informal early session to scrutiny, of course it will be absolutely right. I want the equation to be as transparent and full as possible. That's how we do our business for anybody listening out there, and it must include a solid link to the consequences of not proceeding, because that has forget social costs, which we're debating at the moment, a practical bottom line cost. So the equation and any value judgment has to take account of all the values. That lies ahead. I don't think we can go much further unless you think so. What we can do, Chair, can say again that there has been testing of the private markets. Anybody listening to this, let's go through that in private session. This is, for me, a little learning, Chair, if I can say this, about how we present this when the work's been done. But for the record and for the public, there is no suggestion, other than the one posed as I'm going to treat it as a question to us, that this is anything other than proper business. That will still be subject to formal scrutiny.
Okay, so if we do not satisfy Councillor Rowe's request in a private session, if we do choose to do that, is there a reason why Councillor Rowe cannot? Well, he's requested specifically to see the questions that were put, which got us that legal advice. Could that subsequently be made available to the panel? Is it a fair request?
So yes, in answer. Yeah. So the question was put to legal counsel at a cost, if I just may say that, in response to the letter that was sent in to Democratic Services. So that the challenge in the letter from Councillor Sunnix that you all signed, that was what was put. So you absolutely can have that. What you have received is the results of that, because we would have assumed, obviously erroneously, that you have assumed we've asked what you asked. But if you're not believing that, we're happy, obviously, to share what was put to council.
Okay, that's fine. So you're simply saying that yeah, okay, fine. So you're simply saying that what we put forward, that was simply what you sent to the legal counsel, and they've replied with the information that we've been given.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Fine. Okay.
Satisfied?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I still think you're unsatisfied around the point of market value, and
yeah, no,
from a layman's, you don't.
I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me how you can say it's at market value, but then we won't put it out to market value. That sounds to me.
Chair, the questions were asked by, I think, William or through Councillor Dundas, and we put those to legal counsel, and that's what we got back. So those are the questions. So we've gone through that. Patricia.
Thank you. And again, to repeat, the quote that you've given there, Councillor Rowe, from the general consent is around undervalue. So the 2 million is related to, if it's more than 2 million of an undervalue, it has to go to the Secretary of State. That is normal standard practice up and down the country. What we are saying to you is we are not marketing this at an undervalue. That is the state. I'm sorry. So I'd appreciate a little bit of respect if you don't mind. So what we are saying is we are marketing the site at full value. We are restricting the market to RPs, registered providers, because what we want on the site is 100% affordable housing. If we go to the private market, you will get a maximum of 30%. So you are going to get a minimum, depending on density, a minimum of 350 affordable homes. If you go to the private market, you will get 110 maximum. So you will get a third. So the purpose of this is to make sure you maximise the site in terms of value for affordable housing. That is why we're restricting it to the RP sector.
Yes, and I understand. And what I'm saying is, and apologies if you think that was disrespectful, I'm simply saying that that's not, I understand what you're saying, but that's not the true market value. So if you're going to get the true market value, you need to put it out to every developer, not just the restricted number of developers. That's the point that I'm making. And if your business case holds true, which I'm sure it does, then the value or the market price that you can get from those private developers will still be less than, you know, the proposal that you're putting forward will still be of market value and not undervalued by more than £2 million.
But you will get a maximum of 110 affordable housing, affordable homes. Not
yeah, but that's a political decision, right?
350.
Yeah, that's a political decision. I'm talking about the process, though.
No, it's about the strategic intent of the site.
Okay, but
the strategic intent of the site
so
is
does
to
that,
deliver
so
affordable homes.
So does the General Disposal Consent 2003 take into consideration the strategic consent of the site?
Yes, because we're not marketing at undervalue. The general consent that you're quoting is in relation to a 2 million undervalue. Yeah. We are not discounting the site. You are not selling the site at a peppercorn or a pound, which councils up and down this country have done for decades.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you
are.
So
that is not what you are, because
no, I'm not. I'm suggesting that
you are.
I'm suggesting. Well, no. I mean, like, give me some respect back, right? I'm suggesting that there's the gap between what you could get on the open market price would exceed £2 million more than the value that you're currently getting.
So the evidence that we've had does not reflect that. So as Leah said earlier, we went to the private developer market. We went to 4 of the main house builders in the country who do this day in, day out. Not one of them was interested in a full purchase of the site because of the risk and the economic climate. Every single one of them wanted a joint venture with the council, which means the council is then taking risk on house sales. It also means that they are only going to be delivering a maximum of 110
affordable homes out of 350 houses.
Mrs.
So
Can I jump in?
Can we see those?
Mrs. Barry, would Lee's presentation assist in this conversation? Because I feel that we are at a point now where we probably have an understanding that you are asking for clarity around some wording within legislation. We've had a very robust, incredible response as to why it is not quite relevant, what the insinuation over here is. But if Lee's presentation will help us further, it might be suitable that we move into private session. It might be. Okay. Then I will then ask panel members if you would wish to do that, and just to be clear to members of the public and for the matter of the record, by us moving into private session, if that's the will of panel, we can then return to this meeting in public session, in which there may well be some recommendations that will be on the record as a matter of public record, as a consequence of discussions that happen in private. That's how it works, isn't it, Mr. Clark?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we can do that. I've also got the alternative. If we're coming back into public session purely to hear recommendations that can be given in the public session, obviously those will be in the public minutes, but instead of having a kind of tacked together like 2 minutes bit of footage for the live stream afterwards, what we could do is take those recommendations, should they be made, and add them in the description of the video on YouTube, so they'll be there attached to the video, rather than having just a tiny bit where, you know, we come back into the live stream, because by that point I don't think anyone's going to be watching anyway, but they will be on the public record, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'll ask members of the panel if they think that's a good idea. I'm not going to make a decision. Yeah. So, okay, folks, would you like to move into private session? Can I see those in favour of that raise their hands, please? Okay. That's a clear majority to do that. Therefore, I will read out the following set of words so that it is clear for the record. In accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Access to Information, England Regulations 2000 as amended, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information, for example, confidential, personal, financial or legal advice, in Part B of this agenda, printed on yellow paper, can be decided. Exempt information is defined in section 1001 and schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Okay, therefore, with agreement, we will move into private session now, and I will wait until our Democratic Services team confirms